Okay, soil water part 2. So gravitational water is what moves through macropores, and that's gravity pulling it downward, and it's of little use of plants. So the water table is the upper surface of the zone of saturation. You can see that on the graphic here. And then the groundwater is found underground in the cracks and spaces in soil and rock. So the one thing I want you to take away from this is the irrigation. The green on this chart is irrigation, and that's where a lot of our water is going. And you would think it would be a lot with the rural areas, with livestock, etc., but it really is irrigation. Okay, perched water table, you can see that here. It's basically where water gathers, and one of the things you've got here is you've got gravel and you've got sand, and those are two different types of soil textures. And when you have an interface between soil textures, you will have this perched water table, because it'll take a lot to get that water to go to another soil texture. It has to saturate the upper portion before it leaves that area. So you end up with this perched water table. Here it is in a container. So a lot of people put gravel at the bottom of their containers, and actually what that does is it just creates that interface I was just talking about, and your area that's going to get saturated, or the perched water table, is going to be much higher in the pot, and you're going to have some serious problems with your plants. So it's not a good idea to put gravel or stones in the bottom of your containers. And here's just a graphic of the structure of water, a water molecule, and the hydrogen bonding between more than one water molecule. So water is attracted to water, so that's cohesion. The water molecule is highly cohesive. It's very sticky, as you can see in this graphic. It's actually the most cohesive among the non-metallic liquids. And then adhesion is when water is attracted to other substances, and in this case we've been talking about soil. And this is just a good graphic. This actually has everything going on here. We've got adhesion to the needles, we've got cohesion of water molecules, and then gravity is going to pull those drops down. Okay, adhesion water is right around the soil particles. Cohesion water is between particles, sticking to itself. So capillarity and water movement. Soil water exists in small spaces as a film around soil particles. You just saw that in the previous slide. Small soil pores act as capillary tubes. Capillary action holds water in the small pores against the force of gravity. The smaller the pores, the higher the water will rise. And water will move from particles with thicker films of water to particles of thinner films, up, down, etc. And I did want you to see water movement through different structures. We've got granular in the left, prismatic is the next one, blocky is the next one, and platy, which is usually what you find under compacted soils, is the last one. And you can see that's the worst for getting water through soil. And we've got our ideal soil on the left that we've gone over before, and the clay soil in the middle, you're going to see the pore space is going to be more water than air, and then with sand it's going to be more air than water. So you can see there's a higher capillary rise in clay soils than it is in sand type soils, because there's a great gravitational pull through sandy soils. They've got macropores, so the water is not going to be going up. It's going to rise greater in fine textured soil. Okay, so the amount of available water controls how fast microorganisms work. And microorganisms, they're going to need some air in there. If there's too much water, it can be a real problem. Available water also influences how many nutrients are available, how much water is transpired, how plants make food through photosynthesis, and how the soil warms up. If the soil is too wet, it's going to take a very long time for the soil to warm up, and that can be a problem for microorganisms. Okay, water is stored in the pore spaces in the soil and on the surface of soil particles. We saw that earlier, and the amount of water in the soil at any one time depends on several things. Of course, weather, if there's been a lot of heavy rain, which we've had a lot of that, the amount of runoff and the drainage rate of the water through the soil, and the size of the pore spaces. So I talked about this in an earlier presentation. Here's saturation. All pores are full of water. The gravitational water is lost. Field capacity, this is the available water for plant growth. And then the wilting point, or permanent wilting point, there's no more water available to plants. I'm going to go through each one of these. So field capacity is the amount of soil moisture or water content held in the soil after the excess water is drained away. Usually takes 2 to 3 days after rain or irrigation, depending on your soil, of course. And this is the soil that has the ideal amount of both air and water. And this is perfect for plant processes such as nutrient uptake. Okay, in waterlogged soil, the pore spaces are filled with water and there's no room for air to enter. And this is where we get into a lot of problems with our plant diseases. There's not a lot of organisms that can survive this either, so you're going to be limited on that. So even if you have organic matter in the soil, it's not going to be breaking down because it doesn't have any oxygen. Okay, permanent wilting point. Plants can't take any more water. That water is sticking or adhering to the soil particles, and of course this can be to lack of rain, a lower water table, soil that drains too easily such as sand, forgetting to water. And really the two ways people kill their plants, it's either too much water or too little water, and that's the reality of the situation. So if you can rectify those, you're not going to have a lot of problems with your plants. Okay, here's just a typical water capacity. These are soils used for turf, or it could be for anything, but you can see that there's much more gravitational water in the sandy loam than there is in the clay loam. Plant available water is not going to be there. It's going to be more so in clay loam. And then there's actually more unavailable water in these small pores than you would have in the sandy loam. So one thing to think about is all irrigation water contains dissolved mineral salts. And it really has to do with where the irrigation water comes from. Snowmelt water typically has a low amount of salt. Of course, in our area, that's not necessarily the case in places that use salt on the roads. And then when irrigation water evaporates, salts accumulate. So you may need to be doing some leaching. And we'll be talking about stuff like that next quarter when you take pests. You're going to see damage on foliage when you have too many salts accumulating on the roots. Okay, and this is something from Seattle Public Utilities. They posted this a number of years ago, but they were trying to get people to use clocks, timers that would be clued into evapotranspiration. Evapotranspiration, as we talked about earlier, is a combination of transpiration and evaporation. And of course, in our area, July is going to be the area we're going to have the most historical evapotranspiration, And what happens a lot of times is people turn on their irrigation and they just keep it on the same rates all summer long. And so they're wasting water, basically. So with these evapotranspiration timers, they actually are clued into how fast the water is evapotranspiring. And this is just suggested watering depths for different types of plants. So trees would be up to 3 feet. Shrubs are going to be about 2 feet, and then herbaceous material will be about 1 foot. And the thing to think about here is when you have a clay soil that has been allowed to dry out completely, you're going to have a lot of difficulty getting that moisture down 3 feet, because if you think about how slow it infiltrates into the soil, and then how slow does it percolate through the soil. So it's really important to not let the soil dry so completely, especially on plants that need to have some summer water. And this is an area, well, there is some irrigation classes coming up, but you're going to want to place your emitters along the plant's drip line if you're going to do drip irrigation.